Doctors of Reddit, tell us about the dumbest patient you ever encountered. An ophthalmologist on the line. The patient's eye condition wasn't improving, so I asked if he was using the eye drops correctly. It turned out he wasn't. He insisted that his right eye was actually the left one because he threw the ball with his left hand. I argued with him about the right and left eyes for a good 5 minutes before he finally acknowledged that he had the wrong eye. There were also 2 patients looking at the sun. They complained that it was the same thing as looking at something. Look at the starry sky, because technically, the sun is a star. I had a blind patient who insisted on riding a motorcycle. After he entered the building, he had to give it up. A young couple comes in, saying they've been trying to conceive for almost a year, but have not succeeded. I start by taking a history. It turns out the woman had been taking anti-inflammatory pills for years for menstrual pain. When I explained how those pills worked, and advised her to stop taking them and continue trying to conceive, they didn't believe me and insisted on seeing a fertility specialist. I thought this only happened in TV shows, but my sister's friend, she's a doctor, told us about a teenage girl who went to the ER with abdominal pain. So, it's just as you think. When they asked her, she swore that she couldn't be pregnant. They did standard tests, and guess what? The girl ended up being pregnant. The patient couldn't believe it, even though she denied that she was having sex with her boyfriend, so the doctor, my sister's friend, asked her what contraceptives they were using. An apple. My mom worked in a large hospital and heard a story about a guy who called the emergency line and said he'd accidentally stabbed himself with a knife while cutting something. The first advice was not to pull out the knife, to which he replied, "What do I do if it's not holding?" They provided him with instructions. When the ambulance arrived, they found the guy with a knife in his gut. So, he pulled it out. We had a surgical patient in training who had amputated toes due to diabetes. He was on insulin, but his blood sugar wasn't decreasing. It was somewhat bizarre. Eventually, we found a pile of candies under his pillow. I don't know if it's dumb or just sad. Maybe it's both. In radiology, I was told that they gave orange gowns to a patient for an MRI, and he put them in his mouth and swallowed them. I discharged a Russian patient after hospitalization for alcohol-related liver disease. As I was sending him off, I emphasized the importance of abstaining from alcohol, and he sincerely asked me if vodka is considered alcohol. I'm not a doctor, but a woman came to me complaining that she could no longer afford to buy medications because she's using 15 grams of herbs a day. Not half a gram, but was literally spending $200 a day on grass. There was also a 20-year-old guy who came to us with abscesses due to poor self-care but forgot to tell us that he had necrotizing penis. We didn't find out until days later that he didn't show up for further treatment. I'm not a doctor, but I worked as an administrator in an ophthalmology clinic. A patient was prescribed eye drops before surgery. He returned 5 minutes after the consultation, very worried, because he didn't know how to get the eye drops into his eyes. Our nurse suggested that he try to squirt them in. Another patient was suffering from chronic dry eyes, and he was complaining to our doctor that a patient wanted to schedule an emergency consultation because his pain had intensified. Apparently, he heard somewhere that honey is added to drops for treating dry eyes, so the man just poured honey into his eyes. If you need anything else or further assistance, feel free to ask. I'm not a doctor, but a technician in a catheterization lab. A patient's wife brought him a sandwich before heart catheterization. You're not supposed to eat beforehand because we use sedatives, and none of us were told, even though he hadn't been previously confirmed to have eaten or drunk anything. During the surgery, the patient became drowsy, and he began to choke. The result was that a person in intensive care died because his wife did not pay attention. I delivered his food to him. Please, carefully listen to your doctor's instructions before procedures. These rules exist not to starve you but to keep you safe. I had to explain to a 17-year-old girl and her mother that she doesn't actually have an allergy to alcohol, but just a hangover. She complained that in the evenings when she drinks a lot, she usually would get lightheaded, feel nauseous, sometimes even throw up. But this didn't occur consistently, and there were no other typical allergy symptoms. When I worked as an assistant in an obstetrics clinic, a patient called to schedule an appointment because she needed to have a fallopian tube inserted. I was so confused that I asked her if she wanted to get her tubes tied. No, she said, I'm trying to get pregnant, so I need a maternal tube. Of course, I scheduled her for a consultation about fertility. I'm not a doctor, but an embryologist. A man came to donate sperm before starting IVF with his girlfriend. He was taken to the room for sperm collection with instructions on how to proceed. He signaled, and when I went to collect the sample, I saw that he had poured it directly into the cup. It turned out that the girlfriend didn't have any ovaries and had been infertile for a while, which is why they had problems conceiving. Unfortunately, this is not my only story, just the funniest. Life of a 22-year-old patient with burns hit rock bottom in one night. I arrived there as a resident, and they were already talking about her in the burn unit. The girl had been at a bar with a group of friends and managed to rack up a bill of $200, which she couldn't afford to pay. So her friends told her they would pay for everything if she allowed them to pour Bacardi 151 on her and light it. She agreed, not knowing that alcohol is highly flammable. My favorite case, she went to the supermarket for fried snacks, tried to heat them in the microwave, unsuccessfully, and ended up burning everything. Firefighters arrived, and the patient continued to shove the remaining snacks into her mouth in front of the rescuers and my team. Unfortunately, I wasn't there to see it with my own eyes, but the next day I read about this girl in the newspaper. I still wonder how this patient lived to be 50 years old and didn't accumulate any injuries. She insists that she didn't eat. We in the emergency room are trying to figure out what happened when I hear her saying she liked the homemade sauce, sauté, the main ingredient of which is peanuts. And mind you, homemade. She made it herself. Yes, it was dumb. The second, one of my regular patients, whose sugar level was definitely too high to measure, but she only drank water and ate just one apple. Not considering that she had chocolate bars in her bag. Patients with dementia do all sorts of silly things. For instance, they eat styrofoam. Surprisingly, it all ended well, and cork wood, this case did not end very well. But my two favorite stories. First, a young girl ended up in the emergency department on Christmas with a distressed face, allergic to nuts. She says she has an allergy to peanuts, but God forbid, she has never experienced it. You had to help the burns heal quickly. That's how he got third-degree burns. Some people just can't stand it. During my internship in the surgical department, a patient aged nearly 20 was admitted with third-degree burns on his right arm. I was writing his history and conducting a standard questionnaire. When I asked how he got burned, the guy started telling me that he initially had a minor burn, just a small blister on some fingers and palm, from touching something hot. Then his friends advised him to boil cannabis cream with the oil and apply it to it. A veterinarian. A bulldog swallowed the electronic keys to the car. The owner simply decided to go out with the dog to unlock and start the car. They turned to us only after 48 hours, when the keys stopped working, and the dog began to vomit. First of all, I am a nurse. This is something like 2 in 1. A boy with a knife injury to the palm was brought to our emergency department. He attempted to remove an avocado pit by stabbing it with the sharp end of the knife while holding the avocado in his hand. As he slipped, the knife went through the avocado and into his hand. The doctor examining the patient went home that evening, and the same evening started demonstrating his. My dad once had a patient who caused harm to her child because she thought children should only eat fruit and nothing else. A doctor from the intensive care unit. Families of patients with extensive strokes justifiably ask if they can consider a brain transplant. If you need further assistance or have more texts for translation, just let me know. Thank you for your attention. Please subscribe to my channel.